Sean Diddy Combs was back in court, not only facing new charges, but apparently sporting a new look. There's talk about a potential delay in his criminal trial, a lot of conversation surrounding one key alleged victim, and also more updates about what his life is like behind bars. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Sean Combs was back in a New York federal courtroom yesterday, and because there are no cameras in there, annoying, yes, very, very annoying. I could probably do a whole show about how annoying that is. No, we don't have a visual or audio account of what happened, but I tell you what we do have. We're going to have our very own reporter who is in that courtroom. She's going to be on in a second to talk more about it, because before we get into what happened and also how Combs looked, that's an interesting part about it as well, I want to lay the stage here a little bit, why he was in court. So the reason the embattled rap mogul was in court is because he was arraigned on a third superseding indictment that was filed against him by prosecutors earlier this month. It expands the charges. So yes, he's still facing sex trafficking, racketeering, prostitution charges, but this new indictment adds 2 charges and has some differences in language we'll talk about a bit too. But apparently in court, there was a lot of discussion regarding one particular alleged victim, a possible trial delay, and also Combs looks really different from the last time you saw him. And this comes as there are new reports about Combs' life behind bars, and we got our hands too, by the way, on the jury questionnaire to be sent out to prospective jurors as we barrel towards a May 5th jury selection, potentially opening statements by May 15th. Is this ambitious? Probably. So I want to get into it, and I want to bring on the person who usually I talk with her over, on our platform here. I never have her in person. She was in that courtroom for this hearing, saw Combs with her very own eyes. She is with me on set right now, Law&Crime's reporter, Elizabeth Millner. Good to see you.
Good to see you as always, Jesse.
Thank you. I'm happy. This is the first time we've been on set, so I really appreciate it. Talk to us about how he looked, because I think that was a big point of interest, right? How Sean Combs looked.
Always. I feel like last time we saw him in court, he just looked very gray, very white. There's been rumors that he used to dye his hair, but also prison, being there for months on end kind of ages you, and that's what we kind of are seeing now. I remember first being inside that courtroom and being like, whoa, this is Diddy right over here. But now it's like, he looks like just a regular man, strip away the designer shoes, the designer outfits, the Diageo liquor and all of that stuff. And really, you're just looking at a regular man who's about to face trial. When he came in, he kind of did, the Diddy thing where he kind of looks at everyone in the room. Yeah. He kind of appears very confident. He sat down, he hugged Tenny Garagos, because inside the courtroom yesterday it was just Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos. But he sat right beside his attorneys, hugged her, kind of was chugging water in between, but seemed kind of in good spirits. There wasn't any family there, but from my understanding, it was kind of a last minute hearing. Originally, everything was supposed to be handled on Friday. Instead, it was moved to Monday for some reasons that I'm sure we'll get into in just a little bit.
So just to be clear, he had like white hair, like a white beard.
Not a white beard this time.
Not a white beard.
He shaved the face. He had a little goatee, but
okay.
The goatee was still white gray.
Did he gain any weight?
He has put on a couple pounds,
Yes.
and if you're in prison, or in a detention center for a while, and you're, stuck with like honey buns or canned fish or like food that's not necessarily the healthiest, as opposed to eating from like 5-star chefs or anything like that. He did put on a couple pounds, especially from the December hearing. I feel like the December hearing, it was kind of after the shock of being in a detention center for a couple months. Now it's like, okay, he's settled in, he's put on the weight back. So
how was his demeanor from what you could tell?
His demeanor seemed very, I always kind of get a little apprehensive saying uplifted, because who is uplifted being in a detention center for months on end, coming into a courtroom and seeing that your family's not there or anything like that. But Diddy's never going to show that he's not confident in any aspect, knowing that a lot of people are watching him. You can bet that he probably may have watched a couple sidebars, may have read a couple articles about what people are saying about him when it comes to how he's appearing. So it kind of feels like before every court hearing, Mark Agnifilo or whoever the attorney may be that goes outside kind of speaks to Diddy before the judge comes in and everything like that. So maybe it's a pep talk that he's giving behind those closed doors. I'm unaware of what really those conversations are, but you're never going to see Diddy slipping, especially when eyes are on him.
And you talk about the conversations he has with his attorneys. There's been a lot of reports that Mark Garagos, the acclaimed celebrity attorney, is now joining Combs' defense team. Was he in court? Any word that he's a part of the team officially?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was actually working on a story for Law&Crime News about it. And
everybody check it out.
Yes, everyone check it out. So that's what I was kind of wanting to see whenever I walked inside the courtroom today. But it was just Tinny. It was just, who, by the way, is Mark Garagos' daughter. I think a lot of people know that, and just Mark Agnifilo. But Mark Garagos himself was not inside the courtroom. I was watching some clips because I know he has the Two Angry Men podcast with TMZ's Harvey Levin. And Harvey Levin even was like, your client is telling people that you're going to be representing him, and Mark Garagos was playing very coy about it. He didn't answer the question fully, but from the reports that have been suggesting that he will play a major role come trial. But, you know, last time we checked on the paperwork, no mention of it being filed just yet.
Hey, I want to quickly thank our incredible new sponsor, Experian, for sponsoring Sidebar. And this is a big deal because Experian can help you stay on top of your finances. Yeah, sure, April's Financial Literacy Month, but Experian, they're all about that all year round. So the first step to take control of your credit and finances is to download the Experian app, which, by the way, has tons of free tools. Your free FICO score can help you boost your FICO score instantly for free with Experian Boost, free access to a marketplace of credit card, loan, auto insurance options that are matched to you, free credit monitoring with real-time alerts to keep you in the know on changes to your Experian credit profile. And also, let's not forget, you can easily freeze your Experian credit file for free in the app, helping protect you against identity theft. So make sure your finances are always in great shape with Experian. You can use the link in the description or scan the QR code to download the free app now. Results will vary, additional terms may apply, and see the App Store for more details. Okay, so let's get into the substance of what the hearing was. He was there to be arraigned on this new superseding indictment that came down earlier this month. Can you summarize what the changes are in this new indictment?
Well, obviously, we had the new two charges added. So we'd have count 4 being sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion. And that kind of mainly pertains to victim 2. And so from what we understand about victim 2, from what the defense paints, victim 2 was a former girlfriend of Diddy. And those charges kind of range from 2021 to about 2024.
Recent.
Very recent, exactly. Yeah. And so when it comes to count 5 in particular, it's interesting because I know as far as the defense, they wanted the Mann Act, that charge to be tossed. They said that it's racist, and then the prosecution adds that charge to count 5. And so those dates range still pretty recent, from 2021 to about 2024.
And that's transportation to engage in prostitution,
yes,
right? And I mean, they still have the charge with victim 1, but now they have victim 2.
Yes, okay. Victim 2. And so, and when it comes to transportation to engage in prostitution, that also applies to alleged victim number 2 as well, too.
Great. And I also thought there was I noticed there was a new a special sentencing factor for the racketeering conspiracy charge, which obviously they want the max on this. And when you're looking at racketeering conspiracy, he's potentially looking at life in prison, so they added a specialization there. And then I saw some language too, like they really wanted to amplify that at least 2 of his victims, who are not even victim 1, 2, 3, or 4, but just these 2 individuals, one he allegedly dangled off a balcony, one he pointed a firearm at or brandished a firearm. They wanted to be really clear it was a female victim. It's like they wanted it to be very specific. So what was the discussion in court of this new indictment? What did both sides say? What did the judge say? And how did Combs plead?
Yeah, so Diddy pleaded not guilty to the second superseding indictment. He did waive the judge reading the indictment, so we didn't get to hear a full reading inside the court. You know, all of the reporters pretty much had it printed out. So we understand kind of what the meat is behind the second superseding indictment. But Diddy stood tall when the judge asked him, how do you plead? He just said not guilty, sat back down. And that was kind of the end of it. And then we all thought, as reporters, I know for myself, I especially did, that maybe it'd be the end of the hearing, but then we got more into just some other matters that I'm sure we'll also get into in a second.
Sure, but no complaining from the defense, like, hey, you just threw another indictment at us. Does this change anything? I mean, they've made prior comments that it doesn't change anything, but like, did anybody address the substance of, you know, you're adding these new charges with respect to victim 2, anything like that in court?
From my understanding from the defense and their perspective is that they are in regular communication with the government. They were even communicating, as they mentioned, on Saturday and Sunday, just kind of talking about a possible adjournment, a 2-week adjournment when it pertains to the superseding indictment, mainly because they want more time, essentially. But it wouldn't be too long. It was only for about 2 weeks. And I think the issue comes up on whether or not speedy trial is kind of in effect, and that was kind of brought up. But as far far as the defense and kind of the discussions right after Diddy pleaded, their issues were pretty much about discovery, and delaying openings might be a possibility, and that was something that they want to explore. I feel like we'll hear a lot more on whether or not that'll actually happen at the next court hearing on Friday.
That's on Friday. I'll talk about that in a second. It's interesting you mentioned delay, and I want to just amplify something about this because we did by the way, the judge said we're a freight train moving towards trial. I saw the reporting on that. By the way, when he said it, is he like annoyed? Is he like, this is what you wanted? Like, can you sense from the judge if he would be like, let's all delay? Do you think he wants a delay? I mean, I'm kind of asking you to read the judge.
I know, he's kind of a hard judge to read a little bit. I do have to give him props because he seems very fair to both sides. I think a lot of times, more so than, issuing rulings, issuing judgment, he's more mediating between both sides. He'll say things along the lines of, so what I'm hearing is that you as the defense wants this, or what I'm hearing from you as the government want this, kind of trying to translate for both sides in their own words, whether or not. But he did make it a point that we have been moving very quickly, and trial is supposed to start in a matter of weeks, but with all this new information coming out, it's like, how really
do you have a trial?
Go about?
Because here's the problem. I did a sidebar on this, and I feel confident to say that I kind of sided with the defense's argument that you will need a delay. Why do I say this? Because I did a previous sidebar on this, but the defense accused the prosecution of trying to introduce all of this evidence of uncharged conduct, old allegations of sexual abuse in the 11th hour. Now, the defense objected, say this is totally unfair. It would make the trial longer. They said it was prejudicial. And how could they prepare in time for this when a lot of it, they say, is so old, and how do they fight against it? I thought that was a good argument. It's an argument that we saw in the Harvey Weinstein case. I mean, it's a different kind of case, but uncharged conduct was used to actually prosecute him and convict him. And appellate court looked at that, actually overturned his conviction. Different scenario, but the point is, if they're going to bring in all this stuff from years and years ago that he's not been charged with, I was like, okay, maybe they have an argument. How are they supposed to properly prepare? There has to be a delay. Anything like that in court?
Nothing like that just yet. I feel like we're going to really get like the full scope and the full picture come Friday. But there was a lot of discussion just over a lot of material when it pertains to alleged victim number 4.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so from my understanding of victim 4 from the notes that I had took, because we're not allowed cell phones unless you get special permission or anything like that. But the way the defense was making their arguments, and this was by Tinny Garagos, is that alleged victim 4, who pertains to the racketeering charge, will set the stage for RICO. And for our understanding from the defense, that this person is very important to actually both sides. What we do know about this person is that she has been working with Diddy for a while now, for a number of years, and she has been working with the government, the alleged victim, since the beginning. Now, they were concerned about 3,500, and I know you as a lawyer probably know a lot more about what
It's basically the statements from government witnesses.
Got it.
Yeah.
But a lot of the issues surrounding her role come trial is going to be about the emails. So what the defense is pretty much asking, and the government said that this was kind of unprecedented, so I'm definitely interested to hear your thoughts on whether or not the government should be in possession of all these emails from alleged victim number 4. So the defense wants these emails, but the interesting thing about the defense wanting these emails is these emails are back and forth between the defendant, that being Diddy. So the government is trying to ask why, if the emails are back and forth with Diddy, would you need to go through us, the government, to obtain and get possession of these emails when they're back and forth between your client and alleged victim number 4? And so from the defense's arguments, they were saying that this witness is someone who is cherry picking information and cherry picking the type of messages that they are sending over to the government to kind of help build their case as far as evidence goes. They screenshotted messages to the government, but the problem is this alleged victim has 100,000 emails in her possession that are very critical, the defense is saying, but the government isn't taking possession of it. And so the defense is left without pretty much a lot of important materials that they feel like need the full context, the full scope. But again, if there are emails back and forth between Diddy, why wouldn't they be in possession
So two things that come to mind is one, does Diddy actually have them? Did he delete them? But another thing that comes to my mind is there's been so much discussion by the part of the defense that the warrants that were used to collect evidence, that the applications for the warrants were incomplete. They said the prosecution used cherry-picked communication. They didn't give the magistrate judge enough information to decide whether there was probable cause here for a warrant. And their argument has been, if the judge had the full context of the conversations or the full context of the text messages or emails, maybe they would have said, wait a minute, this looks like a consensual relationship. Maybe there's no crime here. Maybe there should be no warrants here. And the bottom line is if you provide an incomplete picture to a judge, judge an application for a warrant, the warrant's invalid. Anything that you get as part of that warrant, all that evidence should be tossed. So it seems to me this goes in line with their argument. And I think they're very curious to see, what did victim 4 provide you? What exactly did she provide you? What did you take from it? Was it the full picture? I don't know, that goes to my mind, but that's really interesting. And it's interesting because the victim 4 is not actually individually charged, like with sex trafficking, as the victim of sex trafficking or transportation to engage in prostitution, but seems like an important person nonetheless. Was there anything else that happened in court that you thought was interesting?
Yeah, the government's response was pretty interesting, that pretty much that when they had spoke with the defense over the weekend, there was no issue about discovery. That actually came up on Sunday, and now we know that the hearing was on Monday. And so the government pretty much is objecting to the adjournment, that being the 2-week kind of pause. When it pertains to victim 4, they did learn that these emails include several thousands to the defendant. We already know this. They were addressed to Diddy, and say they produced the emails to the defense. So they're, again, not in possession of the full extent of the emails. But when it comes to the judge's response, he told the defense pretty much, if you want to subpoena the documents, just go ahead and do it. And so to your point about the freight train heading to trial, we're expecting more paperwork to especially be filed in these next 48 hours. So that's why I always divert to Friday. We should learn a lot more, at least get some things kind of settled out in terms of the matter of where we're all going with this, because May 5th's coming very, very soon.
Very, very soon. I wanted to ask you something else. As somebody who knows the ins and outs of this case, who's been at so many of these hearings, has been following it, doing reports on it, I want your opinion on something. So we got our hands on a draft jury questionnaire that was filed in this case, something that will apparently be sent out to prospective jurors in this case. And it reads like other jury questionnaires by providing instructions like don't talk about the case, don't research the case, and ask preliminary questions if you have a conflict or medical issues. But then it says this. This is a criminal case. The defendant, Sean Combs, has been charged in an indictment with various criminal offenses. The indictment is not evidence. It simply contains the charge. The charges in this indictment stem from the allegations that from at least 2004 through 2024, the defendant, with assistance from employees and associates of businesses he controlled and ran, including a recording studio, a liquor brand, a clothing brand, a media company, and other lifestyle companies, allegedly committed multiple crimes intended to protect the defendant's status and reputation and to satisfy the defendant's personal desires. These alleged crimes included kidnapping, arson, bribery of a witness, obstruction of justice, drug distribution, forced labor, sex trafficking of multiple adult female victims who the defendant allegedly coerced to engage in sex acts with him and or with male escorts, and the transportation of those victims and male commercial sex workers for purposes of engaging in commercial sex acts. So actually a little bit of a different description, consistent with what we saw in the indictments, but just a little bit different. But then it gets into some interesting questions for these prospective jurors. So it says, before today, had you read, seen, or heard anything about Mr. Combs or the criminal charges brought against Mr. Combs? Have you personally formed any opinion about Mr. Combs' guilt or innocence of the crimes charged as a result of anything you have heard, read, or seen? Have you communicated to others or posted your opinion on social media or online about Mr. Combs? Elizabeth, I think that last one is going to be very, very tough. I mean, do you think we can really get a jury seated who is fair and impartial in 4 or 5 days, right? Don't they say we're going to start in May 5th and be done by like May 9th and start with openings? What do you think?
I have a lot of thoughts. Well, first of all, I know I could not be a juror, mainly because of our work here, but also I am trying to boggle my mind around how fast this jury selection process really will go, because truly, who hasn't heard of Diddy in some aspect, especially when it involves this case? I remember even being at the courthouse yesterday and a little girl comes up to me. She couldn't have been older than like maybe 11 years old. She's like, oh, who's in court today? And I said, oh, Diddy, do you know him? And she said, yes. So a lot of people,
parents.
Yes, a lot of people know who he is. And even in terms of just their usage on social media, if I'm either on both sides, I wouldn't have someone who, one, follows the Shade Room, posts comments on the Shade Room, posts TikToks about Diddy, makes memes about baby oil or anything pertaining to we've learned about this case. So I would be surprised if, one, they get any type of prospective jurors under the age of maybe even 30. Even those who are over 30, I'm wondering what that'll even look like, because this used to be Diddy's city. This is New York City where we're at. He's going to be tried in downtown Manhattan. So I'm wondering, even in terms of people who are local here, who have grown up here in New York City, how they can be fair and impartial when Diddy, for most of his career, did hold this power and this reign and this kind of stronghold on the city because he's from here. A lot of things as far as Bad Boy happened here. But even in terms of just the world scope, a lot of people know who he is. So I'm wondering, can they get 4 or 5 days in a full jury? I would bet no, but not a betting person.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you didn't see, as far as I saw, like any kind of change of venue or anything. And I think like they want it here. I don't think they want to delay the case any longer, but I think they want it here. He probably, jury of his peers. But look, we all know that it's not if you knew Diddy or you heard about Diddy or you know about the case. It's can you put all of your former opinions about this case, can you put that to the side and look at the facts and the evidence and make a decision? It's easier said than done. You also wonder if there's going to be the danger of stealth jurors, but that's why the prosecution and defense are going to look at these people's social media accounts and see if they posted anything or liked anything or reposted anything. By the way, before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about something else. So thinking of Combs' appearance, we're learning more about his time in federal lockup at the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center out in Brooklyn, right? What are we learning?
Oh, we're learning that apparently Diddy's been trading, allegedly, pretty much trading cans of fish and food for currency, which isn't uncommon when you're inside a prison, when you're inside a detention center or jail, what have you. Not that I know from experience or anything like that, but I'm a huge fan of like 60 Days In on all those types of shows. But that is just kind of the way it goes. And I point back to another very high profile defendant, very different cases, very different charges, like Alec Murdaugh, for example. Yep. If you've watched the Netflix documentary towards the end, he's talking about how he's exchanging honey buns and making bets and that type of thing. And I kind of apply that to this situation because you're not allowed to have currency as far as cash goes or Bitcoin or credit cards or debit cards or anything like that in a detention center. So it's not unusual that in exchanges of currency that you would go for the canned fish or maybe the Cheez-It crackers or, whatever type of sweets that you can get a hold of, because in those types of environments, food is currency. Maybe cigarettes are currency. Maybe the usage of an iPad or an MP3 player. I think that's what's listed on the MDC website. But those are currency when it comes to being behind bars.
And yeah, I mean, I think hair dye is, as we talked about, is banned. Mm-hmm. So that's why, he's meeting with his lawyers. He's currently, by the way, I think held in 4 North, which is like this dormitory style unit, holds like, the reporting indicates 20 inmates. He has the laptop. He's meeting with his attorney. So look, you understand why he was rushing towards trial. Mm-hmm. He wants to get out of there. He believes he can win. He believes he has a great defense regarding consent. And I think that's why they want to go full steam ahead and try to put the prosecution, their feet to the fire and make this happen. So listen, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. Our eyes and ears inside that courtroom, telling us the latest on Diddy. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And I hope everybody can check out Elizabeth's reports on YouTube as well. They're fantastic.
Thank you so much.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.